So let's get to this Washington Post article. It says triple whammy of good news catapults the Dow more than 900 points. Triple whammy. It says right here, it says a triple whammy of good news led by promising results from a coronavirus vaccine trial buoyed investors Monday, powering Wall Street to strong across-the-board gains. For one, this is the first triple whammy. This is the first whammy. There is a palpable relief that the majority of the states are reopening their economies, including 75% of California. Second, there is growing hope that a vaccine is coming our way sooner rather than later. And lastly, the third whammy is that the Fed chairman, Jay Powell, told investors over the weekend that the central bank's checkbook remains wide open, strongly hinting that more monetary policy stimulus is on its way. The economic collapse has taken a dangerous turn where now it is consumer prices that are being pulled down into an abyss as consumers sitting at home have postponed their purchases. The danger is that consumers will see that prices are falling and actually stop buying goods and services to wait for even cheaper prices and a better deal, which will only serve to prolong the recession and reinforce the economy's downward spiral into the unknown. That put investors in a selling frame of mind, with the Dow ending the week 2.6% lower. The S&P 500 fell 2.2%, and the NASDAQ shed 1.2% over the 5-day run. But Monday's good news saw investors leave safe havens for riskier ground. So tell me what the hell. So this whammy, is that really good news that the Dow went up 900 points on this triple whammy?
I'm not. It's not. I mean, it's like. It's a sugar high from a donut. It's as good as the feeling for the 20 minutes after you ate a donut.
Okay.
I mean, this is all hocus pocus. This is all baloney.
Okay.
I mean, you don't know who knows from the vaccines. This is the market is a frazzled drug addict looking for a hit one way or the other. It is really to be ignored. The reality is, because the stock market is the only thing that can drive real political action. And so when the stock market goes into those big, crushing free falls like it did in 08 and 09 and like it did in March of this year, that's the sort of thing that can create significant structural political change, which is why they've figured out that they just jam it with the Federal Reserve to put the narcotics in the system, give the stock market morphine. Everything else that's happening inside of the economic system is much less apparent, much less mentally, like there's no mental sharpness to it because it's so slow and dull, right, and dispersed. This small business, that small business. People don't like to talk about their financial problems because it's associated with shame.
Mm-hmm.
So there's all this sort of, whereas when the stock market just goes down 50%, it forces activity. It's unfortunate that they figured out how really to give it the narcotics that they do, because that allows them to cover up everything else. But yeah, I wouldn't worry about the triple whammy up down. It's nonsense. I mean, the stock market's out of its mind in the sense that it's not. A person on morphine is not a healthy, coherent person. And a stock market on trillions in Fed stimulus is not a healthy stock market. It has no association with the value. A stock market at its best, in principle, represents some estimation of the economic value of the enterprises and businesses and companies in an economy. Right? That's what it is. And the U.S. stock market doesn't reflect that. It reflects sort of a sentiment analysis of some of the businesses, although really there's only 4 or 5 businesses that control the entire stock market now. Because we've gone to this sort of hyper-consolidated monopoly architecture as a matter of policy in this country. But everybody knows that it's supported by Chairman Powell and his $10 trillion plan.
Okay.
Does that make any sense?
Yes. No, it's all making I get everything you're saying. You're doing a great job breaking it down. Everything's just overwhelming.
Trying to break it down. No, I know you're that's where you end up with. But again, it's sort of like, there's the crucible of all the pressure of all this horrid information. You're just like, oh my God, this is horrible. Ranked choice vote, just making every election, whether it's city election, state election, county election, presidential election, primary, et cetera, just ranked choice voting. Just ranked choice voting.
Ranked choice.
One thing. And again, I'm not. Imagine instead of going into the battle, you just dissolve the floor underneath them, and they all fall through it. You eliminate the binary vote, and you eliminate the entire basis of their monopoly.
Well, yes, that's exactly right, which is why it will never happen, which is what, and that it don't, yeah.
Well, they passed it in Maine. I mean, any state with a referendum can get it done. There's some like 37 states. I mean, I don't mean to go all optimistic on you here, but it can be done. It has been done. It is being done. More should be done. If I was the Wizard of Oz and could, inspire any set of activity, I would strongly advocate these sort of super surge protests, this recurring pulsing, and I would demand health care, and I would demand ranked choice voting, and I wouldn't stop the pulsing protests until those things happen.
Ranked choice voting. You think it's that powerful of a tool that it could actually change things?
Again, I'm not suggesting that just that one thing, the next day everything's going to be back to glory.
Right.
But I'm saying that, it's as if it takes away a huge, huge factor in the entire power base of the two parties, because the two parties function on a political system that's entirely based on destroying your opponent. No one's running for anything. All the money, the $1 billion on this side, the $1 billion on that side, is spent to destroy your opponent. So it doesn't matter how much you hate Donald Trump.
Right.
You hated Hillary Clinton more.
Right.
It doesn't matter how much you hate Hillary Clinton. You hated Donald Trump more.
Right.
You think that people you think the Biden people are in love with Joe Biden? A senile, a man who's basically being abused by the people around him, as far as I can tell, to be forced into this situation, and as it is. But you think it's that people are like, listen, people hate Donald Trump more than they hate Joe Biden, and we can spend a lot of money making people hate Donald Trump more than they hate Joe Biden. But that entire dynamic of lesser of two evils voting, and the entire campaign apparatus, campaign industry, Oppo research, the entire industry is based on monetizing and advancing power through lesser of two evils and character assassination. It's what the American political system is. A ranked choice voting, and I'm sure you're going to have some viewers who will say, well, no, ranked choice voting, there's some, the instant runoff, there's different sort of identifications and optimizations of this method. And so I don't want to get into the weeds of which one is the best version of this. But when you allow a prioritization of a selection of choices, you end up with forcing the candidates to run for things, because
yes,
you want to be, even if I'm not, if it's Jimmy, Dylan, and Steph running, and I want to get as many if I'm not going to be the number one, I want to get as many number two votes as possible. Mm-hmm. And the problem with the character assassination is the assassin, the person who's throwing the mud, finds themselves deeply unpopular for the character trait of being a mud thrower, which makes it really hard to get the number two position, even if you can't get the number one. Anyway, I'm going on and on.
No.
The ranked choice voting is appealing because it flips the incentive to run for things, as opposed to the incentive is simply the annihilation of the opponent.
So that would be really a huge sea change in our politics if people actually could run for something, and then people got to vote for something instead of voting against someone else, which is what the situation we've been in my entire life.
So that's why I bring up the concept and the reality of ranked choice voting. It's why, I mean, listen, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party in the state of Maine have never agreed on anything ever in the history of that state. For the first time in the they managed to get ranked choice voting as a referendum. The referendum passed, so all the people of Maine said, we prefer to vote through ranked choice voting just because we're the people and this is a democracy. And so we've all sort of thought about this and debated this, and we would like to have more choices in our selection process and a more rational interpretation of our sentiment, which is what are you for, not who do you hate more, right?
Right.
The current voting thing is who do you hate more. And the Democrat and Republican Party, for the first time in the history of the state, got together to go to the Supreme Court to try to declare ranked choice voting unconstitutional. It was the first thing they ever agreed on.
Yep. That was amazing. And they didn't they get a court to actually overturn it or something? And then maybe
it's been going back and forth. They won they win,
Yeah.
and then they you know, it's going on for years.
Yeah.
But the point is, you know, much better to create a referendum and get ranked choice voting on the ballot
Mm-hmm.
than to vote for Joe Biden and hope for the best, or vote for Donald Trump and hope for the best.
Right. Hey, this is the part where I tell you where our live shows are, but there aren't any. And then I would tell you to go join our premium, but nobody has a fucking job. So why don't you just enjoy the video?